Salesforce.com was founded in 1999, and we've achieved spectacular revenue growth, going from $0 to our first $1 billion in the first 10 years. We then added a second $1 billion the year later. We're on $4 billion this year, and we're on track for $5 billion by the end of the year. Pretty spectacular revenue growth. From a headcount perspective, we started with 4 people in 1999, and we grew that to 4,800 people 10 years later. In 2011, I wanted to share some data with you, first on a global basis, and then locally from an Australian perspective. We were making a lot of hires in 2011, about 300 a quarter. But the way we were making those hires wasn't ideal. We'd grown so quickly, our processes, our systems, our tools hadn't really kept up with that growth. Ed talked about being scrappy yesterday. Scrappy is a good thing to be. But when you need to make thousands and thousands of hires in a quarter, you also need to be a more structured, well-oiled machine. We had a pretty big recruiting team globally, so we had 52 recruiters. But most of those guys were on 12-month contracts, and so there was no career progression for them, there was a high churn, and of course, when we needed to add a recruiter, we did so because it felt like everyone was busy. We didn't necessarily have a really strong capacity model to say, look, this is what we need to do to get to the targets that we have. We had a very good referral rate in 2011, but occasionally we lost candidates along the way. And of course, the experience that a referrer has is absolutely crucial. So we needed to work on our referral process. And perhaps most worryingly, we didn't have a single view across all countries, across all business units, about the data around recruiting. You can probably identify with this. Each manager or each recruiter or each person in each location or each business unit has a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or a dashboard that they measure, and that's great. But how does that fit with the rest of the business units, the rest of the countries around the world? You know, we needed a standard view of the activity and the results we were getting from recruiting. So if you were a recruiter at Salesforce in 2011, you liked your job, you were being successful, but it was pretty unsustainable. Locally, excuse me. I joined Salesforce on the 11th of July, 2011. At that point, we had 150 employees locally. And on my first day, I was told we needed to double that number within about a year. So it was a pretty good first day. I had 1 permanent recruiter and 1 contract recruiter. And again, many of you will be able to, I guess, relate to some of the challenges that you're facing when you're trying to mature a recruiting organization. You know, the chaotic scramble for candidates. Managers want more visibility into what's happening and what activity is taking place. We also had a pretty amateur approach to using LinkedIn. As I'm sure you all know, LinkedIn Recruiter is the finest tool ever released from a recruiting perspective. It's awesome. But we didn't have a coherent strategy around how we were using Recruiter. We didn't have training in place. We weren't advertising every single job on LinkedIn, for instance. So we needed to improve in that space. So things were okay, but there was room for improvement. Next, the world went mad. We saw this graph before. This is what we had to do in the 2 years after 2010. And this is the budget that recruiting had. It's fair to say that in 2011, we have what we like to refer to as an oh shit moment. How are we going to do that? There was a sense of impending doom. We were this guy. It was all going well, we were very happy, but we were about to get hit in the face. So we thought to ourselves, who can help? Who can we learn from? Who has achieved massive scale, massive growth? And who can we model our recruiting structure on? Thankfully, we didn't have to look very far. The Salesforce at Salesforce, which is a great sentence, is the world's most powerful sales machine. The data doesn't lie. We managed to acquire that many customers in an 8-year period. 2,000% increase in paying customer growth. So we thought to ourselves, why don't we do what those guys do? Why not mirror sales? When I asked earlier who was in sales, this is why I wanted every hand to go up. Look at the similarities between sales and recruiting. When we sat down and thought about this, we wondered why this hadn't occurred to us earlier. The similarities are incredible. So what did we do? Firstly, we restructured our recruiting organization to mirror sales. Now, if you take one thing away from today, this is what you should take away from today. We analyzed each of the functions within a successful sales organization, and we mapped that to a recruiting world. Let's take marketing, for instance. In the sales space, customers need to know that you have a great product. They need to know where they can buy that product. They need to want to buy that product, and they need to know why they should buy that one rather than your competitor's product. In recruiting, potential candidates need to know, A, you're hiring, you're growing like wildfire. B, you're the 4th best place to work in Australia, for instance. C, why they should work for you rather than some of your competitors. And so when you look through all of the different aspects of a sales cycle and a sales organization, there is a perfect analog within recruiting. Just replace customers with candidates. So we built 4 new teams globally: a careers marketing team, a recruiting research team, an inbound candidate sourcing team, and an exec recruiting team. Specialists in each of these spaces. In Australia, we hired 3 new resources: a recruiting coordinator to handle the administrative aspect of the recruiting process, so interview organization, greeting candidates when they arrive, candidate experience. We hired an outbound candidate sourcer. That person's job is to go out and find prospects, find candidates that might be interested in working for us, and then hand them to a recruiter to close those candidates. And we hired someone to focus specifically on senior management hiring so that we could free up our other recruiters to work on different roles. We also started to leverage the 2 new teams we'd created at headquarters: our careers marketing team, which helped us with our LinkedIn strategy, amongst other things, and our recruiting research team, which I'll talk more about this morning. One of the best things that happened when we made this change, and to be honest, we didn't plan this just happened, it was great, is that we found natural career paths appeared. By mirroring the sales organization and by building a structure, it became apparent very quickly that we could hire people as a recruiting coordinator, we could promote them to an inbound candidate sourcer, we could promote them to an outbound candidate sourcer, we could promote them to a recruiter, and then to an exec recruiter. So all of a sudden, it became apparent to the people on the recruiting team that there was a future within the company. This has had a great impact from an attrition point of view and from a morale point of view. In fact, last month, we promoted 40 people from recruiting coordinator to inbound sourcer globally. The second thing we did was look at our technology. We're in a fairly fortunate position. We make some of the world's best technology, but this doesn't have to cost you millions of dollars. It can be simple. One of the things we did was we looked at our applicant tracking system, and we thought, what are the metrics that sales measures? If you're a sales leader, you want to know the ratio of calls made to prospects. You want to know how many meetings your salespeople have been to. You want to know how many people are interested in buying. You want to know how many deals have closed, and you want to know how much money you've made. In recruiting, you want to know your ratio. You want to know what your pipeline looks like, what the number of interviews looks like, the ratio of interviews to offers, the ratio of offers to accepts. So we refined our ATS to capture these metrics. I always think this is a bit funny. We are the world's leading CRM company. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management, and it captures all of the things you do to understand your customers and to help sell to them and service them better. We didn't have a CRM for recruiting in 2011, which when you think about it, it's weird. So we built one. And what our CRM allows us to do is to capture the details of candidates that aren't yet applicants. So these are people that haven't applied for a role. They may have been sourced via a recruiting research team. And what we can do is we can capture all of the personal information, where they work, where they went to school. How can we rank them before we've even spoken to them? So do they work for a company that we happen to hire a lot of people from? Do we find that we like their employer a lot? We can capture all these things and we can start to use this information to tailor our approach to those candidates. It's quite comprehensive. It has the social profiles. A lot of data that comes is parsed from their resume, for instance. And so we've got this bank of all this data about candidates that aren't yet applicants. We built a research service. So there's a team of people right now who a recruiter on my team can submit a research request to. They can say that they want to find, in Sydney, they want an account executive, for instance, with 5 years experience, who's worked for a software company, and who hasn't worked for these 5 companies. And our research team will go away, they'll use LinkedIn Recruiter, they'll use our own sources, they'll use other candidate databases, and they'll deliver a list of prospects to our sources and to our recruiters to take forward into a process. And of course, the next thing we did was start to get serious about using LinkedIn. Every recruiter got a recruiter license seat. We started to train every recruiter how to get the best from the license. We started to make sure that every job was quickly captured and posted on LinkedIn. We started to put marketing dollars behind some of the pay-per-click so that we were sponsoring jobs and that candidates would see them in their feed and on their profile. And we updated our own company page as well. The third thing that we did is we started to embrace data. This is one of my favorite quotes, and it really highlights just how important data is. If you want to have an adult conversation with a chief financial officer or with a managing director or with somebody on your leadership team, and you don't go to them with every conceivable piece of data that backs up the suggestion that you're making, your ask for more budget, your justifications for why you've decided to do this thing, you're blown out of the water. Data enables you to have a conversation in terms that the business understands, and they'll give you money, is the short answer. The next thing we did was we matched sales reporting. So this is a real dashboard of one of our sales teams in the US. How many calls are they making? How many prospects are they qualifying? How many dollars have they closed this month? And so we mirrored that. So for our sourcing team, we know how many calls are they making? How many interviews have they organized? How many placements have they been responsible for this month? In the same way, in the same format. We got serious about capacity modeling, and this is a super important area, particularly if you're requesting more resources, if you're asking for more recruiters, if you're asking for investment in technology. This is the thing that nails it with your CEO. I can tell you to a high degree of accuracy exactly how many people we will hire next quarter. I know how many people we've hired per recruiter, per geography, per business unit for each of the roles and the countries that I look after. And so I can go to my VP and say, we need to hire 1,000 people this quarter. Okay, we have capacity right now to hire 900. Here's the data, here's what we've done in the past, here's what the market looks like, and here's what we're going to do this quarter. Would you like us to hire 900 this quarter, or would you like to give me an extra X dollars to hire 5 more recruiters? It's such a simple conversation when it's in data that managers understand. And of course, we started to use some of the data that we can get from LinkedIn. Now, this is free. This is one of the great things that we can get for free from LinkedIn. I've got 3 things I'd like to show you that we use, and it's really revolutionized how we make decisions within recruiting. The first one is in-mails. So how many in-mails are our team sending to prospective candidates? What's the response rate from those candidates? How many people are accepting? which companies are getting the most emails and which companies are responding favorably. We can use all of this data to target our approach. You know, the next time we make an approach to a candidate, it's based on some of the feedback that we've got contained in this data. This is my favorite slide. Market mapping used to be the preserve of double-barreled search firms. They used to say it cost a lot of money and it took a lot of time and resources to map out the market, and I know who's who, and I'm going to charge you a retainer, everything's going to be fine. You can get this for free from LinkedIn. I know for a particular role in a particular location how many people exist at all of our competitors. I know how many we've contacted. So we can make decisions using that data. We can say, for instance, if we look at Cisco, anyone here from Cisco? Good. Oh, hello. How are you? Good. Lovely to see you. We've talked to 6 out of your 58 salespeople. Sorry. Now, is that enough? Probably not. Is 10% enough of a whole population of salespeople for us to talk to? Maybe we should make that 20%. Anyone here from Oracle? Great. We've talked to 40% of the salespeople at Oracle. So should our approach now be to talk to more people at Oracle, or should we switch our focus to converting those people we've spoken to into candidates? That's the power of some of this data, and it's free. It's great. The last piece of data I want to share with you, and I've hidden the names here. Obviously, normally they have the names written in there. So each line represents a company, and how many people we lose to that company, and how many people we hire from that company. And this enables us to understand our place in the competitive landscape. Are we winning? Are we getting more people than we're losing? Obviously, that's a prerequisite to growth. But which companies are we getting most employees from? And which companies are we losing employees to? And why is that? Now that we know that we've lost 31 people, for instance, to a particular company and only hired 3, what are they doing that we're not? This is gold. So what happened when we made those 3 changes? Firstly, our capacity went up a lot. We hired 1,200 people this last quarter globally, which is a significant increase from where we were 3 years ago. Our productivity went up 60% in Australia. Imagine if you could achieve a 60% increase in output from your recruiting team in Australia this quarter. Largely, it was because we focused on particular tasks and we hired people. So for instance, a recruiting coordinator who took away all of the administration from the recruiters, somebody to focus purely on outbound candidate sourcing, and someone to use research. 60% increase. We still have a great referral rate. It's now 50%. We haven't lost a recruiter since then, which I'm pretty proud of. This was a problem to begin with. It's only got worse over time, unfortunately. And of course, we built enormous confidence with the business. We could sit down with them and have a conversation that was backed up by data, and they would trust the recommendations we're making, which is what it's all about. So I'm going to leave you now with 3 key takeaways. Firstly, build a sales organization. Now, if you're in the audience and you've got a small recruiting team and you don't feel as though you can devote resources to different specialities, then do this. Think about your recruiting process in the same way as a sales process. Talk to and get a meeting with your leader of sales and sit down with them and think about how they structure their sales process and how you're structuring your recruiting process. Secondly, invest in some technology. I obviously recommend cloud-based technologies because that's what we do. Now, we don't sell one of these, so I'm not trying to sell this to anyone. But it doesn't have to be expensive. You can pay on a per-user basis, but you need the right technology supporting you. And of course, embrace data. Make sure you've got that data. Make sure it supports the direction, the strategy, the decisions that you're making. Thank you so much. Has anyone got any questions? Hello, over there.
Your talent mapping. On the talent mapping, the passive candidates, how do you handle any privacy concerns where they've not actively applied, presented you with a resume, but you're storing their data?
So the fact that they haven't applied obviously means that we don't even necessarily contact them. So, you know, we research as much as we can in the same way that, you know, Dun & Bradstreet, other companies, you know, and credit agencies, for instance, have, you know, files on people, you know, with their credit history, those kind of things. If somebody, of course, is unhappy or uncomfortable with having their data, you know, stored by us, then of course we delete it. But we haven't found that to be a concern, frankly, so far. Anybody else? Hello. So the question was, how do we improve productivity? We saw the data before. How do we make sure that that's real, I guess? And so the simple answer is we looked at the hires per quarter per recruiter. So at a point in time, we could get X number of hires per recruiter in a particular geography, in a particular segment. Now you can take averages across the different roles, different business units, different geographies, but we found it makes much more sense just to try and tie the data to a point in time. So if you're hiring for a software developer in Sydney, comparing that productivity with the same role in the same location next year is going to be much more useful than averaging that with all the sales hiring and the exec hiring and whatnot. So we took a point in time of how many hires each recruiter could make, and we then compared that with today's number of how many for the same roles we could make. Hello.
Hi. Are you guys incentivizing your sales force or recruiters like Rapid7 or? I
wish we were. I really wish we were. We are not. In short, you know, it would be wonderful to be able to build, you know, to that structure. I would love to do that. Effectively, the way we incentivize our recruiters, we have, you know, they have a fairly high base, and then they have a kind of a fixed bonus on top of that, but that goes up and down with company performance. So we don't currently metric them or pay them. Sorry, we metric them like salespeople. We don't pay them like salespeople. If we did, they'd all be on millions of dollars, which would be great.
Food for thought.
I would love to do that, yeah. Is that a question over there?
Oh, hello. A couple of questions.
Sure.
My first one was, you talked about in 2011 your headcount was 150. So I was just interested where you are now.
400.
400, okay. And what's next? What do you need, you know, where, in the spirit of continuous improvement, what is next for you?
So we saw, I guess, you know, that enormous growth on the graph. The graph for the next 2 years is even more aggressive than that last 2 years. So from our point of view, the challenge doesn't stop. It actually gets harder as time goes on because we're just on this enormous vertical growth rate. So for me, we need to, I guess, so currently we've got, you know, 11 people in recruiting locally. You know, we need to grow that team. We need to start to, you know, segment that team even further, and also to put in place more of a management structure. So currently everyone's reporting to me, and, you know, getting to a place where we've got a more sustainable team structure and, you know, more recruiters is the first step for us. Secondly, you know, we need to keep pushing the envelope. So using the data that we have, thinking about new models, so for instance, you know, I had a meeting last week with a guy who's coming up with a new sourcing tool, which, you know, aggregates all sorts of data and enables us to, you know, to target passive candidates more effectively. So investing in new tools and exploring new tools is also something that we're very keen to do, because we need to keep that growth rate and keep that going. So it's more of the same, but let's see what other technologies are out there that can help us. Hello. Oh, hello. Sorry, two.
Hi. Just interested in what was the most difficult stakeholder conversation that you actually had to get buy-in from the business around restructuring your recruitment model? And,
Sure.
And the most
that's
benefit that's actually
That's a
generated?
great question. So for anyone who didn't hear, it's what was the most difficult conversation or the most difficult stakeholder that we had to convince in terms of changing the structure? The honest answer is that the conversations weren't all that difficult because we went with the data. Because the people that made the decisions at Salesforce are people that have presided over this enormous revenue growth, and to them, change is something that literally happens on a daily basis. So we weren't trying to convince, your old-fashioned, sort of old-school, stodgy person that we had to shake things up. We're talking to people who are working a million miles an hour, change strategy, change direction, weekly. So we went to them with the data. We said, look, this is what we think is going to work. This is the data that backs up those suggestions. And of course, they were salespeople. And so they said, so you're going to do what I did. And I've just I've just made these $4 billion. Go for it. So it actually wasn't all that difficult. I appreciate it won't be that in every conversation. But the key thing is that if you've got the data, what's there to lose by giving it a go? And there's a question over here as well. Hello.
I just wanted to know, with your team of 11, were they solely responsible for all of those increases in hires over those 2 years, or did you engage the hiring managers to help you?
So at the time, between 2011 and 2013, we had an average of 5 recruiters. So we've only grown significantly in the last couple of years. The hiring managers were very engaged, and at some point they were probably too engaged, to be honest. They get pressure, of course, because they have to make their sales targets. And the only way they can make their sales targets is by hiring enough salespeople. So if we use that as an example, we had massive hiring manager engagement. They were very keen to do everything they could to help. Referrals, of course. A lot of the people we hire are hiring manager referrals, and they don't get paid if it gets referred into their own business unit, but they do get paid on cross-business unit referrals. So we did leverage them for referrals. We also get them to come along and speak at our events. So we run happy hours where we get prospective candidates along, get them drunk, and have them talk to people. So they help in that regard as well. But largely, it was the recruiters using the new model, using the data, and working bloody hard to get that productivity increase. Hello.
Hi. Seems you have a very sales-driven organization.
You can say it's even in the name.
Yes. Quite high pressure, I imagine.
It certainly is.
To retain talent
Yep.
in such an organization, I mean, it's one thing bringing them onto board,
Yep.
but how do you retain them? What do you think
Sure.
Salesforce does right in that regard?
2 things. First thing is we only hire people that want to work for a crazy, fast-paced company. We select people, people self-select out because it's just too high pressure, and that's fine. That's okay. So we hire the right people to begin with. The second thing we do is we have, there is all the pressure and there is all the numbers and there is all the metrics. That's definitely true. But we have this heart of the company. So our foundation and our philanthropic efforts that come from our Benioff to the CEO all the way down, so we all get 6 days a year paid to go and volunteer for a charity of our choice. If we complete that 6 days, we get $1,000 to give a charity of our choice. We're supported to do incredible things to give back. And my team, for instance, has a goal that we'll all hit 100% of that within the first 6 months. And everyone's tracking at meeting that goal. So we even have goals for giving back. There you go. That's how goal-driven we are. But that's a huge thing. The chance for someone to make a difference in the community and to do something that means more than just achieving targets is a massive retention tool for us. And our benefits are great too. So, top health insurance, gym membership or protein powder that you can expense, those kind of things. It's pretty cool. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much.